LA. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you, Christina, for connecting us for this talk. I'm really excited. I love LA. I was just there a few months ago. Wish to be back soon. But yeah, today I want to talk about something called the research death spiral. I know it's a pretty dramatic name, but I'll talk about why I coined it this and how tactical UX research will not spark innovation. So for the agenda today, I'll go through a quick intro to myself, some plugs, shameless plugs, then we'll get into the talk, and then talk about scaling UX research practices, and then the Q&A at the end. But if you have any questions, feel free to just pop in the chat as we go along so that we can get to them at the Q&A. All right. So a little bit about me. Socially awkward ambivert who likes to sing karaoke. Doesn't mean I'm good at it. I'm a huge space nerd. My dad got me this telescope when I was 8, and I've been using it ever since. I'm a huge fan of the outdoors, and this was a photo of me solo camping in Lassen National Park. And if anyone has ever gone to Lassen, I think it's California's best kept secret, because there's Sequoia, there's Yosemite, but no one really hears about Lassen. I highly recommend it as well. And as a person who likes to race cars as well. So that's a little bit about me outside of UX. And just a little icebreaker. I want to go through this 2 truths and a lie game with y'all. And I deliberately show those photos before this question to kind of try and make it a little harder. But the point of this game, and feel free to put in the chat which one you think is the lie. So 2 of these are true, and 1 of them is a lie. Would love to kind of start this icebreaker out. Oh, we got all the options. So we got 3, 2, 1. Katie says 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. All right, I think it's a good mix. All right. So the lie is number 2. All right, so I think half of you got it. But yeah, I've never been caught speeding. Doesn't mean I haven't sped. I just never been caught. Yeah, there you go, Jenny. I've never auditioned to be an Asian pop star singer, despite my uncles and aunties telling me to do so. They just never heard me sing, so they just there's still time. Yeah, and number 3 is actually true. I'm a huge space nerd, and when I was 8 years old, I was just looking at the solar system and how all the planets were lined up, and there was just one outlier. Like Pluto's orbit was way off of the axis, and it crosses orbits. And I asked my 3rd grade teacher, why is Pluto a planet? It's so weird. Anyway, that's my little plug for Pluto's demotion. Sorry, Pluto lovers. Okay, with that, I want to share a little bit about my journey into UX research. Let me know in the chat if you're already a UX designer or researcher, or if you're aspiring to be, if you're transitioning into UX. Let me know in the chat. So I graduated with a bachelor's in biology and psychology from Cal. And I really had no idea what I was going to do at the time. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, Asian parents. So that's what I majored in. I majored in biology, trying to become a doctor. And after I graduated, I worked in a psychology lab with one of the superstar professors in the lifespan psychology area. So I got some experience working in psychology labs. And I also learned client-centered therapy because I was trying to become a therapist. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life. At this point, I never really knew about UX research. And one day, I received a call, and I got a call from a tech company. And mind you, at this point, I really didn't know that UX existed. I was just doing psychology. I only thought working in tech, you had to be a software developer. I thought you had to be someone who codes. And so it never really came to mind. But when they called me, I was like, are you looking for a therapist? Are your workers unhappy? Because I can help with that. But afterwards, I realized that someone with a psychology or like a research background were actually sought after. And that's where I started to think and dig in deeper into the field of UX. And I kind of fell in love. I really enjoyed the aspect because I actually was working in academic research. Things were pretty slow, very rigorous, but very slow. And I dug in deeper into UX research, and I made a choice. I tried studying after work. I tried to transition by reading books and taking classes after work, but my commute every day to work was an hour and a half. And by the time I got home, I was just too tired. I was hungry, and I just didn't have time to study. So I made the leap of faith. I told my PI, I told my professor that I really found something I want to pursue, and that's UX research. And so I quit the job and I studied every single day for the next 6 months. I read books, took classes, uh, uh, just learned a lot on my own. And I applied to jobs. I started applying to jobs and I started getting rejected because I had no experience in UX, and that's what they were looking for. So people told me to apply to master's programs, apply to master's and graduate programs. And so that's what I did. And I applied to master's programs. And this is one of the emails that I got from way in 2015 from one of the master's programs that said, hey, we're looking for someone who actually has experience to join our graduate program. Catch 22s. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to give up. But then I realized, all I was doing was just learning and reading books. No one really cares if you're transitioning to UX that you've read books and stuff. And I started to do my own projects. Here's a picture of me inside a Starbucks back pre-pandemic days, where I would just design my own research studies and go to coffee shops and just ask people, pay people coffee to do my studies. And I just built out my own portfolio. And I just hustled. For the next 6 months, I wanted to give up, but then I saw, I really found out my why, and it kept me motivated. Why exactly I wanted to do this. And then eventually I landed my first job. And then fast forward, I've been at all these companies, big teams, small teams, and I've had the privilege of working with great people and learning a lot. And after I got into UX research, I started getting these kinds of messages almost every day. How do I get in? Do I need a master's degree? Help me out. And believe it or not, YouTube never came to mind. I was just answering people's questions one by one, and I would say the same thing over and over again. And I actually didn't want to do that anymore. So I just made a YouTube video. I know, right? It was born out of laziness, but how ironic, because YouTube is actually a lot of work. And then now, this is my plug for my YouTube channel, but definitely check it out. The purpose is just to pay it forward and help people make the transition into UX research, and even for the UX researchers currently to have a space for us to have fun and engage and learn about things together, and help transitioners not go through the struggle that I did. And these are some of the things I cover in the channel. Very, very research heavy. So not a lot about design stuff. And you can check out my socials here. And one more plug before I get into the research death spiral. I am currently teaching a UX research masterclass 16 weeks program with 10 students. We're actually about to finish up, and 3 of the students already got jobs, and we've been working with a $25 million startup, and it's been such a fulfilling journey to be teaching for the first time and seeing the students succeed. And what I'm going to do is launch a self-paced version of the class, hopefully in the next month or two. And if you want to check out the website, it's 0tx.com/masterclass. Okay. All right. Thank you for hearing my plug. Now, without further ado, the research death spiral. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to break down the definition because it's a pretty dramatic title. Identify what the problem is, define what innovation is, and then give tips for scaling research practices. All right. Let me start off by telling you a story. 6 years ago, a San Francisco-based startup had raised $120 million in venture capital. It's a lot of money. Their product was a Wi-Fi enabled, voice-controlled, sleek, sexy-looking product. 4 years later, it failed. And that company was called Juicero. They had built a Wi-Fi enabled, voice-controlled, sleek, sexy-looking, polished turd. For $700, yes, $700, this machine helps you squeeze juice packets. And not just any juice packets, Juicero juice packets. You couldn't use any other ones. And each of those would cost an extra $5 to $7 just to squeeze a few more bucks out of you. No pun intended. But wait, there's more. You had to be connected to Wi-Fi for it to work. Has anyone heard of this company before? Let me know in the chat. It didn't take long for people to realize that you could just squeeze those packets by hand. No expensive juice machine needed, indeed. So why do I know, right? Who invested in this? It didn't take long for people to realize you could squeeze them by hand. But why do I tell you this story? Well, it's a sleek looking product. I mean, it looks pretty easy to use. It's one button, right? They must have done a lot of tactical testing and evaluation to make it run super smooth. But that's just it. Doing research to improve the ease of use is only one part of the whole. Good UX doesn't necessarily mean value. So they must have forgotten to ask whether this product is solving a real problem. I mean, let's imagine together the user story they must have had. Okay, as a juice drinker, I want to purchase a Wi-Fi voice activated juice machine that can press juice packets so that I don't have to press my own juice packets. All right. I'll stop hating on Juicero. But the lesson is you can do tons and tons of tactical research on a product, make it easy to use, but completely miss the mark because you've had a huge blind spot to your users' needs. And then you end up with a polished turd. That's the lesson. Let me give you another example. This is Google Maps. If you haven't heard of it, maybe you've been quarantined for too long, just like myself. And in Google Maps earlier days, they might give you a window of accuracy from getting from point A to point B. And if they invested in the technology a little bit more, you can have higher precision. You'll get there in 8 minutes instead of a window of time. Now, what if the team kept asking, how can we make it more precise? Well, you'd end up with something like this. You'll arrive in precisely 8 minutes, 17 seconds, 59 milliseconds. Does that mean the research and time invested to get to this level of incremental gain translates to the value for users? No, at least not for your average user. Maybe like if you're flying to Mars and you don't want to miss your path, but for your average users, this isn't really worth your time. And that's the point. We need to know when to ask the right questions and when to move on so we aren't hit by blind spots. So I gave you a real world example, Juicero, and a hypothetical example, Google Maps, of what continuous tactical research looks like. But first, I've been talking all this time about this term. Let's define tactical research really quickly. Definitions 101. What is tactical research? For that, I had to take a step backwards in the sea of different types of research that exists. I'm sure all of you have heard of some variations of research types. These are the ones I've heard of so far, among discovery and exploratory, maybe pathfinding and need finding as well. So you might be a little confused because there's so many types of research terms. So I'll break it down. I've bucketed the types of research into two main ones, card sorting right there. The first is strategic research, which is the same thing as foundational research, aka generative, exploratory, need finding, pathfinding, discovery, all the same. And tactical research, on the other hand, is the same as evaluative research. And you might hear me use them interchangeably. And that includes formative and summative evaluation. Confused yet? Good. So strategic research, this is the big picture, right? Long-term, usually long-term exploratory adaptive goals. And usually this type of research includes building an understanding of something, like your user behavior, what they feel, what do they do, what are the market opportunities, something you don't know, the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. On the other hand, tactical research focuses on the implementation of design, the implementation of specific design recommendations that they all serve to achieve the overall product strategy. And we can do usability testing. Most often when we say tactical, we're referring to usability testing, improving processes, workflows, using A/B testing, prototypes. So that's tactical research. Okay. Definitions 101 over. Now, why tactical research will not spark innovation? This is the product death cycle. It's coined by David Bland, author of Testing Business Ideas. And the product death cycle goes like this. No one uses your product, and therefore you ask customers, what's missing? What should we build? And then you build exactly what they tell you, and inevitably no one uses it. Well, asking people, I think as the UX researchers in the room, asking people what they want isn't exactly user research. Now this is what I'm calling the tactical research death spiral. It's a mouthful, I know. Where we conduct evaluative usability tests, you fix those issues, you build your product with more features with the improved usability, and then you continue conducting usability tests. A lot of organizations focus solely on the tactical research after building something, right? They usually end up A/B testing, and A/B testing, because A/B tests are easy to run, expensive sometimes, but easy to run. However, without a prior foundation to inform our A/B testing hypotheses, we'd be running them blindly. Research teams are then asked to do tactical evaluative research to fix something after it's been built or proposed. And then by that time, it's kind of too late. We can improve the product, but that will not lead to innovation. Tactical research is inherently reactive research. We test only what we know, and we can make those incremental improvements to usability. Can you fix this? Can you fix that? Users aren't liking it. What do we do now? It's kind of a means of putting band-aids on problems. It doesn't spark innovation. Tactical research makes sure our design works well. And we need it. We need tactical research. We get improved wireframes, improved prototypes, more usable designs. It's great. We do need it. It's necessary. But if you're polishing a turd, it's still a turd, right? Everything is based on decisions we already made. It's like playing a video game character. I don't know if anyone knows what this game is from. But it's like playing a video game character and only leveling up one skill. You get so ingrained in that one skill, you forget about everything else, the entire user experience. And remember, like a lot of the evaluative research answers whether something is usable, but it might not answer whether that something is valuable. We might ignore the context, the user motivations, the why. Yes, you might be able to get the why behind why people aren't able to use something, but we need to ask the right questions. Why people want to use it in the first place? Where, when, who, how? And so we need to be more proactive and do strategic, exploratory research, or AKA generative foundational research, to help us inform those early decisions. And doing so not only saves us the time from building the wrong things later and having to fix them, but we're able to explore what could be rather than having leadership or teams tell us what they think should be. And proactive research anticipates decisions we need to make. And so what does proactive research look like? Well, I love this story. One of my favorite stories from the book, Creative Confidence. This is the MRI machine at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And the room itself would be dark with those flickering lights, right out of a horror movie. And for children, it was a scary experience. Kids would cry, they get anxiety and wouldn't want to go in. I don't want to go in. And even when they got in, they wouldn't be calm enough for the machine. And that led doctors to repeat the scan. And this would take up a lot of time and money for the hospital. And this wasn't pleasant for the kids. Now, if the staff gave Band-Aid solutions, they might have enticed kids with candy or just told them, promise it doesn't hurt. I mean, look at that thing. It's scary. It's going to eat me. So what the researcher did was go to a design thinking workshop at Stanford University. And he learned to build empathy with the patients, the kids, and the parents. He then identified where those anxieties and fears came from associated with this machine. And he was able to prototype something called the Adventure Series. Has anyone heard of this story before? So what used to look like this turned into this. It's not a fancy tech solution. It didn't cost hundreds of $millions. It was simply art, but art that solved the problem, which was removing fears in children. It ended up saving the hospital a lot of time and money by not having to do those repeat scans. They didn't have to use anesthetics. And the kids would love it so much that they wanted to go back inside. So the researcher had done the strategic, the generative research. He explored the problem at the core. Yeah, cool. I think some people have heard of it. It's great. But UX researchers may not be given the time to conduct as much strategic or exploratory research. How? How come? Why? Well, I think some of the common reasons maybe research is seen as a blocker, a bottleneck. It just takes too long. Perhaps some stakeholders just don't know that researchers can do this type of research. Maybe they just assume we just do usability testing. Maybe another reason is there's just tight arbitrary deadlines. We have to launch every other week, and simply we don't have the time and we can't make the time. Something we don't want to hear. I don't know if anyone's heard those reasons before, but should we blame them? No. That's the nature of business sometimes. I get it. And the fact that teams are asking for research in some form, that's progress. That's a good thing. But the research death spiral is also a symptom of not knowing what value UX research can really provide, not knowing when research could be included. And in fact, many times in non-mature UX companies, people have likely never seen the benefits of any design until they see something tangible, something they can see, touch, and measure. And tactical research gives that. Tactical research gives them tangible products to touch, feel, and see. And then generative research, it's harder to see that. It's easy to say, oh, we want to improve this metric by X% next quarter. And then teams will do everything in their power to squeeze out the 1%. Oops. And sometimes, let's be honest, we end up thinking about how we can get our users to do what we want them to do to get our 1%, rather than helping users do what they want to do and need to do. All right, so what? All right, we now understand what reactionary tactical research looks like, and how doing that only gives you kind of the incremental UX gains. It's needed, but it doesn't lead to innovation. And now on this theme of definitions, I'd like to now define innovation. And then I'll end with the tips to escape the research death spiral. All right, this guy, Dogecoin killer and all that else. This guy's Elon Musk. Many people mistake him for an inventor, but he's not. He's an innovator. He didn't invent rockets, didn't invent the car, but he's able to innovate technologies in a way that gives value. And innovation happens when an idea is improved upon, combined with, or used in a creative way that adds value. If you look at this photo, I wouldn't really think to flip an umbrella upside down. So we break out of the functional fixedness, is what we like to call in psychology terms. Innovation, it must solve some user need. It must utilize something that's feasible, operational capabilities, and be good for business. So something that's viable. And viability is good for business. As UXers, we have to balance those user needs and the business needs, and sometimes it's hard. But what I like to remind people is that, yes, your business exists, but it only exists if you have customers. And without your customers, you won't have a business. So why not focus on your customers first, right? Yeah, so this is some examples of companies that innovated things and the difference between that and invention. Uber didn't invent rideshare, taxis, or the GPS. SpaceX didn't invent rockets or propulsion systems, and TurboTax, tax season's over, so that's great. They didn't invent the camera or recognition software. But these companies innovated on leveraging those technologies for their business model. Reusable rockets and landing, and unique applications for taxes. And this is an example of a user journey map. Now, very, like very crude experience map. In the red line, the bottom one, that's where the experience lies now. In the yellow line above, that's the aspirational experience that we want. And innovation happens in between here, between that gap. Getting from here to here is innovation. And to understand the gap, we do strategic generative research. We might use methods like diary studies, interviews, to understand how people behave over time. We might observe people through field research, what and how people do things in their context. And you'll definitely learn things you didn't expect. I definitely miss doing field research. Now, with that in mind, if you ever only do tactical research, you'll most of the times you'll only ever play catch up. So we have to be more proactive in our approach. Okay, so some tips to start escaping this research death spiral. The first one is start injecting generative questions into your tactical research. When I first joined Google, I was only asked to do usability testing on our product. And I didn't question it. I just did usability tests. And in the beginning of my sessions with participants, I would always ask some questions like, have you heard of a smartwatch? Have you ever considered one? Why or why not? What do you think of smartwatches? And I didn't expect to learn anything of it. I had no intention of using these questions. They were more like warm-up questions. But then I would notice patterns in their responses. No, I don't see the value in smartwatches, or I have a phone. I have my phone already. And so I thought, why are we fixing usability questions if no one's going to buy the product? I went back to the team and I suggested doing more generative research. And by this time, the product was out. It was already launched for a few years. And now we're going to do research, generative research. And the simple act of asking those adjacent questions and then recognizing there's a problem outside of our immediate scope is what inspired a new roadmap for the smartwatch. And so the introduction to maybe your tactical research is a great place for warming up your participants. And that's also the place to ask your generative questions. Even if you didn't have a lot of time, I think just even a few questions is great to kind of start identifying problems that may not be top of mind for our stakeholders. Second, I feel like a lot of usability tests could be saved, time saved with conducting some like basic heuristics or just talking with your designer and talking about best practices. We can save the time on finding those blatant UX issues if we did expert reviews or heuristic evaluations. Of course, these aren't a replacement for actual usability testing. We should still test with your users because we're not the user, but this could help us save a little bit of time. Now, the purpose of saving time is so that we can carve out this time to conduct more generative research. And many times, product roadmaps are planned out based on guesses and assumptions. I'm sure we've all encountered this before. So question those assumptions. If you find that you don't have ample evidence to start building a product, then maybe it's time for us to push for extra time to do foundational generative strategic research. It doesn't have to be a lot, right? We can start with 10% of our time, then maybe 15%. Heck, maybe even 50% later on. Propose generative research studies that won't curtail current research efforts, because that's still top of mind for stakeholders, but get buy-in for trying. And this is how you might pitch it. Pitch it as, we're getting ahead of the curve, future-proofing the product by understanding trends and being proactive rather than reactive. After all, we're researchers. We're not just problem solvers, we're problem spotters. And the point of doing this is being able to explore areas that we might be blind to. Okay. 4, involving partners and getting involved early. And ideally, we are included in those conversations from the very beginning so that we can help steer the ship with generative research. And, even today, sometimes I find conversations are happening and I can't be in every single conversation. Have constant one-on-one meetings with cross-functional partners. Align on existing and emerging project initiatives. We can be the leader to lead and facilitate those research share-outs and sprints so that research is the foundation for project initiative, roadmap discussions. And another way is to get your stakeholders to watch your sessions, get them to observe, show videos, quotes, different ways to bring the voice of the customer directly to your stakeholders. It's cliche, but it works. It's powerful. And doing this amplifies yourself as a UX leader and ability. It also amplifies your ability to influence crucial parts of your product strategy before you ever need to react to surprises. So if you're talking to people, you know exactly what they're talking about early, and you can anticipate carving out time to do that research. This one's kind of general, but being proactive and future looking. So instead of doing research on things only on the here and now, I know as researchers, we get this all the time. There's so much happening. It's hard to carve out time. But maybe we can at least get some time, like even half an hour or an hour, little occasional sessions to expand the team's timeline. Start thinking, a year ahead from now and brainstorm what the product could look like and craft out a clear product vision. It's not to throw us off course from our current priorities, but it is to give us some time to be creative again. Doing this helps us stay on top of emerging trends and anticipate not being blindsided. At work, we actually have a channel for competitive products. And every day we're seeing more and more competitive products propping up. And I'm like, they're doing great things here. And we're missing out on this. We do need to spend some time adjusting to evolving needs and these trends. So one thing I encourage my stakeholders to think about is, will our users still find this relevant a few years from now? And it gets them thinking creatively, get their juices running. All right. Lastly, last but not least, and then I'll talk into scaling research. If we know tactical research requests come in, we can create a cadence for evaluative research to anticipate those upcoming needs. So at Google, for example, I was working on a rolling study team where there were rolling studies every 2 or 3 weeks for tactical research. And this way, stakeholders know exactly when research is happening. You can save yourself time from reacting to requests and really setting the tone. Like, you're the one setting the pace. Oh, we're going to do this every 2 weeks so that you can stay sane as well. This is a great way to scale your research as well. Speaking of scaling research, and this is the last section of today's talk, how about how to scale research? So I'll give some examples of applications on scaling the research, not the researcher, and becoming an entrepreneur. Okay. So here's the first one, increasing the size of your team. Not much I can say there, but just getting more researchers. Consulting, non-researchers. So you might have office hours to help product managers or designers to do their own research. Delegating to lighten the load for yourself. Holding workshops, trainings, including resources and templates for your stakeholders as well. Establishing research programs, which I just mentioned, like rolling studies, for example, setting a cadence, outsourcing your research, which I won't touch upon that much, and then evangelizing research. So I'm going to focus on the bolded concepts here, because increasing the size of the team, okay, yeah, this is pretty straightforward. Outsourcing, pretty straightforward, but I'd like to touch on these 5 things here. Consulting. This is how we can scale ourselves, scale the research, and not have to be everywhere all at once. Because I think we are really good at juggling a lot. Cat herders, as I've heard before. Consulting. So creating a space for people to come to you with questions or research, or how to conduct their own research. So things I've done is just informal consulting sessions, office hours, or even holding a Slack group or email groups. Like, hey, if you have any research questions, feel free to pop them in here. Delegating is another way to scale yourself. Identify those projects that would make sense to delegate. For example, I had one time I had, I think, 7 interviews in a day, back to back, and I just couldn't handle all of them myself. Maybe I should have planned better, right? But I asked my PM, like, hey, would you be willing to take a few interviews for me, right, while I eat lunch and stay sane? And he's like, yeah, sure, I'm happy to. And I just hold an informal session on like teaching them best practices, no leading questions, how to build rapport. And yeah, that really helps yourself too. And so, and the PMs, some stakeholders actually want to talk to users too. And some of them know that, okay, I know that there's leading questions. I want to do the best I can, so please teach me how to be a good moderator. So that's where you come in. And in order to do that, maybe you can hold some trainings, training sessions, and holding resources. Workshops could take a lot of time and effort to prepare, but once you've done it, you can hold these trainings again and again with the right people who are committed to learning about UX research. And over time, you can turn them into a series. So at my current place, I've actually previously at my previous companies, I've held sessions on moderating mistakes, how to moderate like a pro. And then people started asking questions like, oh, how do I recruit the right participants? What's the logistics of recruiting? And then that would become another session. So another thing that you can do is creating something I call like one-pagers, quick and easy reference materials, so that people can just access. Like, oh, here's how to do usability testing. Here's how to do a diary study. Here's how to do interviews, for example. And fun fact, shameless plug as well, my YouTube videos are required materials at the University of Arizona UX program. And they are also official resources at the Federal Reserve, Alaska Airlines, other universities, and of course, my current workplace, Upwork. So just shameless plug. But yeah, if you create something like that, you can share it with your team. That amplifies yourself as a UX leader as well. All right, a couple more to go, and I'm excited to get to all your comments and questions. Another way to scale your research programs. And by programs, I mean things like rolling studies, rapid research, trusted tester programs. The main purpose is to streamline your tactical research. This way, if you streamline it, you can carve out the time to do more strategic research. Or consider quicker methods. I think one of the main complaints about research is that it takes too long to recruit. And if you have access to tools like usertesting.com, UserZoom, Validately, they have these pools of millions of users ready to take your tests. And you can screen for them too. And one time I did an unmoderated study with 12 participants, and I finished it in about 2 hours. So it was amazing. Once you go unmoderated, you don't go back. Cool. And finally, education and evangelizing research. So further your research beyond the presentation meeting. And what I mean is, yes, you can present your research to your immediate stakeholders, show a PowerPoint, but you can also scale this out, expand it out to the rest of your company or team. So perhaps hold expositions, museums, brown bags, or watch parties, and invite stakeholders to come and enjoy. Right? One time we were working on user onboarding for a product, and I held a lunchtime, like 45-minute optional meeting, and I called it onboarding watch party. So I made it fun sounding, just like this title of this talk. And people showed up, and we watched a video on onboarding for 20 minutes. And then we had another 20 minutes of discussion. And it was great discussion because our team had originally thought of onboarding as something else. And then this video kind of expanded their thinking around what onboarding really means. So this way, it's not just the boring old presentation meeting. You can try different ways to disseminate your research. Of course, getting people on board takes certain people, right? It takes the right projects and the right people. Not all projects could be led by non-researchers. Just keep that in mind. Just identify, have kickoff meetings, identify the problems, the objectives, and you can identify, okay, what can I commit my time to? And for these programs, get the right people. Start with the people who do believe in research, and then gradually convince others and start influencing beyond your immediate team. And the best way to convince people is knowing what they want, knowing what they need. Why should they do the research? What's in it for them? Well, maybe, hey, if you do research, maybe you'll get a nice performance review for doing something outside of your immediate role, impacting directly with your users. Okay, so, and this is my last slide. What to actually teach in trainings, just a few ideas. I call it, you might call it Getting to Know Your Users 101 or UX Research University. Couple topics that have been really popular when I've done trainings for my stakeholders were just why is UX research important? What happens when you don't do it? How to moderate. I think that's a really popular one. How to moderate, how to talk to your users. Because some product managers or designers, they want to talk to users, and some of them are afraid. Like they're like, I'm not a good interviewer. So I also have to teach them how to be confident and that it's not about you. Focus on the user and just reminding them how to be a good researcher as well. Informed consent. Ooh, this one's a huge one. I've had marketers ask me to use quotes from user studies, and I'm like, no. They didn't agree to that. So there's a lot of privacy that we have to teach our stakeholders as well. In academia, there's something called the Institutional Review Board, or the IRB. In UX research, we don't have an IRB. We are the IRBs. So we have to be the ones that protects our users, of course, with the legal team as well. So informed consent, really important to teach. Note taking, how to write up discussion guides, and just like logistics of recruitment. So giving a few examples of how to scale your research. And with that, we talked about what the research death spiral is. We defined innovation. We defined tactical research, and hopefully I've given you some practical tips on how to scale up yourself as a researcher, how to escape just doing tactical research, and how to start involving and influencing folks to start doing strategic research more. And so thank you for listening to me talk. I'm open for questions here. I would love to get to your comments and questions now. And you can follow me here on socials, on the social medias.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank
So
you.
we have some questions that have come in. Let's see. I don't know what order we should. I'm just backing up to, I think Anushka, I don't know if I'm saying the name correctly, was the first one to ask the question. So Anushka, if I go ahead and maybe unmute yourself and then ask your question.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, my question is more around service design and UX research. I was interested in attending this because where I work, we have service design, and they're very much focused on the holistic approach. It takes a long time to actually do some of the research. But in my team, we don't have UX researchers. So I'm trying to actually scale the team. I'm trying to bring a new UX research department within the team. I have product designers. So I'm trying to find what is the nice spot, what is the sweet spot between UX research and service design. So anything you can share with me here would be appreciated.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you're building out that research practice at your company too. That's awesome to hear. So in service design, you're right. It's kind of like a holistic user journey of what people do throughout all processes, all the touch points. I would liken it to doing user journey mapping and strategic research. So yeah, at Uber Freight, when I worked at Uber Freight, my one of my projects was to understand why people kept complaining about truck drivers. And I heard complaints like, "Oh, truck drivers are always delayed. They're always, they hate their jobs. They hate people, blah, blah, blah." I was like, okay, well, let me start to understand the truck driver side of things. Because generally the team was more focused on the client side, the big trucking companies, because they're the ones that pay the money, and so truck drivers were treated as second-rate citizens. Initially, I started off as like thinking in terms of UX research. It has to be UX. What products are we talking about? And very quickly, I found it was like service design. It was how people were interacting with each other at different stages of a trucker's journey. And that is definitely foundational strategic research. And after the strategic research that I've done, I found some really good foundational insights on what all the problems, and we turned that into a design sprint to try and find out solutions to solve for these foundational insights. After the design sprint, we can validate or invalidate concept ideas and turn that into tactical research later on. Yeah. Thoughts about that? Cool.
Sorry, no, that makes sense. Thank you.
Awesome.
And then who had the next question? Was it Americo? Can you unmute?
Sorry, no, I have no questions. It was a very coherent presentation. I have no questions. I just during the presentation it crossed my mind that this negative influence of tactical research is goes around product culture. For instance, I follow Marty Kagan. I follow his ideas about product teams, and he splits. He categorizes around, I think, three kinds of product teams, and not product teams, like teams. The delivery teams that are those Scrum teams, people oriented to strictly to code and build outputs, task oriented. Those teams are more related with tactical research. There are also teams that are oriented for the design and implementation of feature. They also have no big relationship with business outcomes. Likely they are not even cross-functional teams, and there is no focus in the outcome, just in the output in the task. And he also classifies another kind of teams that are product teams, that are cross-functional. They are focused and measured by the outcome, not by the output. And they are empowered. They can explore strategic issues and bring a plan to try to design a solution for the outcome. And that's it. I will say that's my main conclusion of the presentation. Despite it's very well, very good content in terms of the integration with innovation, and I fully agree with that.
Awesome. Thanks, Americo. Yeah, I love Marty Kagan's book, Inspired. I still have to finish it, but I'm like halfway through. I love it. Yeah, I totally agree that, you know, a lot of the I don't know if anyone's watched the show Silicon Valley, but like they really focus on the output, like what to build, when, and not really like why are we building it, and focusing on the end user. Like, why do they need this? What's the outcome they're trying to achieve with this product? What would the users achieve with this product? And that comes from having a clear UX vision and strategy. And it comes way before even thinking about coding a line. And had that strategy, it should be based off of clear user research and identified user problems. Yeah. Thank you. Love it.
Looks like Eric is asking if there's a way to have this presentation at his company. Here, I'm gonna unmute Eric.
Hello, how you doing?
Hello, good.
Great presentation, congratulations, this is great. We have a ton of challenges. I work for LAUX, home improvement here in North Carolina. Recently, we invited Debbie Levitt. I don't know if you are familiar with her.
Yeah.
So she was with us last Friday. And we would love to have this presentation, if you guys are available, to have it to my whole team, to my UX team, because I think this will be a game changer. We are being through a lot of like reorgs with our teams, and right now we only have one researcher. It's very limited. We have a lot of challenges with the store ops to let us go to the stores to do research. I'm actually a product designer, so I don't have the experience that you have. So that's what I'm thinking. It would be fantastic if you can maybe teach us a little bit or kind of let us know what is the best ways. So I'm wondering how I can connect with you, or what can we do, and what do you think, if that is something that is available if we can talk.
Yeah, totally. Let me pop my LinkedIn in the chat. Feel free, everyone can feel free to connect with me there, and definitely I'd love to connect with you, Eric.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I'll reach out to you and I send you my email and all my information and see what we can do.
Awesome.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thank you, Eric.
No problem.
It looks like Sophia has a similar request because she's the first user researcher hired for her company of 100,000 employees.
Dang.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. I mean, they do have UX teams, you know, they do some UX work, but yeah, all those early research and, you know, how to innovate and how to build the right products, not just based off of assumptions. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And we're going through a whole reorg. So I'm, you know, on the same boat now, trying to convince people of doing research early and often being involved in the whole product development process early. But, you know, it's tough for so many employees. You have to like work yourself up the chain, you know.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. How's it like being the only researcher?
Well, it's fine for now. It's just, you know, trying to figure out ways how to get people to where we want them to be, you know, involving UX research earlier in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just takes time, such a beast of a company.
Cool.
And then it looks like Jenny has a question. Jenny, can you unmute?
Sure. My question pertains to an experience I'm currently involved in. So in terms of, you know, not getting caught in this tactical research spiral, at my company, I have joined a product team that has, up until maybe a year ago, probably influenced their product roadmap very much based off of what larger, more powerful clients that they want to maintain good relationships with are asking for, versus collecting, you know, perhaps via generative research, larger insights across more segments of their users to really understand needs in general, to identify those innovation points and opportunities. So even, you know, their roadmap has been pretty tactical and reactive in that sense. However, I'm entering at this point where, let's say one of the products that is being worked on, I've been brought in to do usability testing right now. And in these 2 rounds of usability testing we've done over the past couple of months, you know, me doing my due diligence and asking how it fits into their work processes and trying to understand that better, am learning that it really just doesn't fit into a lot of users' work processes, because that front end work to do that research, to figure out where these needs truly are, wasn't necessarily done. And this feature was totally carved out in mind of serving these target 13 like large clients, we'll call them. And so if you interview these 13 large clients, they're going to say, this works fabulous. I love this. If you talk to a sample size of the other 1,000+ clients, you're not going to hear the same results. And so having the dev team on these calls as observers is it's kind of rough for them to hear these things, but it's also very important to hear these things. And it kind of begs the question, how to process this information as a team, how to, as somebody else mentioned in the chat, and I thought it was a great point, how to help them contextualize it, make sense of it without throwing everything haywire right now, perhaps, you know, prioritizing or how to work with other folks on the team to kind of carve and work your way through that information. Any insights there?
This is a great question, Jenny. That's yeah, wow. Okay, so it sounds like this product works for these 13 clients, and you have already tried inviting some of the devs and the product partners to view like the usability testing results. And I think I get it. So if I were, I think I've been in this position too, and where it's like, okay, it's working. These are really large clients. They give us a lot of money, so we don't want to like screw it up. So I get it. And I just have to ask them a question. You know, I'm doing these usability tests, and there's something we do as product people is postmortems, right? What went wrong? What could we do better next time? And I've started asking a question before I do research is, what if our users end up not liking it or not finding it useful? What are we going to do then? So this is my pre-mortem question for the product partners. And it really is, I'm just forcing them to think about like, okay, if I'm going to do this research and you're not going to change anything, why am I going to do the research in the first place? And so that opens up a conversation for, okay, do we need something else? If you don't want to break this and you want to expand to your thousands of other clients, do we need a separate vision? Or are you willing to make these changes? Because you can do all the usability testing in the world, but if you're not going to budge, then it's like, what's the point? You can show them all the information. I think there's two parts. One part is just trying to convince them, showing them what you could be getting. And maybe you could talk to your analyst or your marketing team. If we did improve the experience for the thousands of product partners, here's the potential return that we might get. And then compare it to what they're currently getting. And if they're willing to do that. Because one of the things I like to do is show them what happens if we do research, and then what happens if we don't do the research. And it kind of opens their eyes to seeing possibilities rather than seeing what current problems we're facing. So instead of framing it as, here's the problem with our product right now, you can try to say, here's the opportunity we can get if we did this. I don't know, maybe that's something you can try, if that's helpful at all.
That is helpful. And it was an idea rattling around in my head, right? Like the work we have done here is not valueless. Like
Right.
13 people are going to use it. But we definitely have an opportunity to add on more here to reach out to more people. So yeah, I do like framing it that way. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck on that. I love to hear how it goes. Like, really.
Thanks. I'll let you know.
And it looks like Rhonda says she's going through something similar.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions?
Happy to just open it up for convos as well. Hopefully some of these
I have just a couple of questions again. You know, as I'm thinking about scaling the team here, any suggestion on how do you prioritize UX research? You know, I think I've seen it a little bit in the chat over there. Like there may be some specific questions that you would ask. Because as I'm thinking about it, I support many product managers. There are like 40 product managers in the company that I work for. So they're all going to want to have UX research. Obviously, you know, we cannot have one UX research per squad, but a lot of different squads. So how do I even like get there, like get started? And you know, obviously I have a budget and all of this, but you know, any advice here would be appreciated. And by the way, great presentation. I'll follow you on social. I'll check out all your videos, and definitely will reach out since I'll be hiring soon.
Awesome, great question. Where it's a 40 product managers asking for research.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good problem to have. At least, you know, they want research. Although, you know, handling 40 requests. Yeah, so having some kind of research intake at least helps you stay sane and prioritize quickly. Although I know from experience that when I have research intake, everyone just puts, this is P0, everyone's urgent projects. So just going through additional conversations of what do you mean by urgent? But yeah, that still won't help you with all 40 product managers. So training, having trainings, having people do their own research, that's one way. And like just logistically hiring people, growing your team, because one person cannot possibly handle all those requests. So that budget, I hope that you get a good budget for that. And vendors can help.
Yeah, I'm looking into user testing and user Zoom right now. I'm doing the evaluation.
Yeah, and I think for maybe lighter weight usability tests, user testing for unmoderated tests, quick turnaround, relatively easy to set up. So that can help like streamline some of those tactical requests.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. I think that's a good argument because I'm trying to also sell on that. And I really want to make sure that the team is trained on doing unmoderated. Right now, they've been doing moderated. And to accelerate the number of testing that we'll be doing, I think unmoderated will be the way to go. And then, yes, I'm leaning towards user testing. So thanks.
Cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great questions, y'all.
I would say have a talk with someone who manages the portfolio, because 40 product teams, right? Did I understood it correctly?
40, yeah, there's about 40 product managers.
I will say have a talk with someone who, like a portfolio manager or something like that, who is responsible for all those projects, because all those products, and try to set priorities. You can use a framework like Canoe model that is it's a model to prioritize like whatever you want, basically assumptions, features, whatever you want, and ever talk with them, and at the side put some analytics in terms of value for the business that each team or project brings to the table.
Right.
But that's a lot of things.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And maybe to Kevin's point, I would really recommend using user testing. So what I've done is you can basically write the tests and like set up almost like templates, and then even interns or other people can go in and just run the tests. It really helps, scaling that up.
Totally. Yeah, once you go try unmoderated, can't go back. But yeah, I'm sharing a screen of like different prioritization methods. I think Americo mentioned Kano, something I've used. But if you're interested in different other kinds of prioritization methods, feel free to just screenshot this and different ways to prioritize as well. Some are very user-based, like Kano, and some are just like, can we make a decision on it?
Yeah. Eisenhower metrics is also very well. You just define both axes, like income and speed, something like that. And just don't take the decision by yourself.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
have people putting numbers in the issues in all the projects, and get away of the decision. Another thing is, as UXers, think more in business and less in techniques and research. Take in consideration the ecosystem and the business, and not only the pure technical satisfaction, let's say.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I started off as a researcher, reading a ton of research books and like honing my craft. And then over the years, I've realized that my bookshelf has been filling up with more and more product management books. Just kind of learning the business thinking side, and the UX strategy side of things really helps as well.
Yep.
I had a question, Kevin, and maybe you addressed this already, but I do a lot of usability testing, and I used to do more strategic. Most of the tests that I do are moderated though.
Mm-hmm.
So when I do the generative questions in the beginning and the interview questions, I can kind of dig and probe, and I feel like that's when I kind of come up with that, the more of the whys. But if you're using unmoderated tools like user testing or something, how do you actually create those types of opportunities to get true generative qualitative feedback, other than just having fill out a form?
Great question, Rhonda. Rhonda, right? Yes.
Yes, Rhonda.
Yeah. I think there are good times to use unmoderated testing, and less than optimal times to use unmoderated testing. I think if you're trying to dig super deep into generative questions, maybe unmoderated isn't the way to go. But I have, I have tried, and user testing allows people to just think aloud on the platform. So I might even just start off by having a question on the platform saying, hey, just tell me a little bit about yourself, or like asking questions and then digging deeper. Yeah, and Jenny mentioned diary studies. That's another great way to kind of get attitudes over time, behaviors over time. It's also unmoderated, so I think that's another good alternative as well, where you can have them more engaged in your study throughout the week or month or however long your diary study is, to kind of understand that over time. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just was wondering if I missed something in user testing that really allows that a little bit more, but it sounds like the think aloud, the recording would be a good place to pull that from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's almost 7. I was going to say we should probably start wrapping it up. So maybe one more question.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think user testing has diary studies, but DScout. And I think it's when I did diary studies. So, I mean, if anyone has a question, feel free. I just wanted to talk to the diary studies things. My favorite method is diary studies. I love diary studies. And this is why. I think when I was trying to do field studies, and then pandemic happened, or maybe there's like legal reasons that I couldn't do field studies, I opted for diary studies. And it actually helped me get insights I never would have gotten if I just went out to the field. For example, I wanted to observe truck drivers, a day in the life of a truck driver. And, with a field study, I can observe maybe a few hours at a time. But a diary study allowed me to see what their life is like at nighttime. Because the truck driver's life is not 9 to 5, it's 24/7. And so I got to see their job at nighttime, like what it looks like at a truck stop. It's filled. And that's just stuff I would never have gotten if I just went out into the field. So big fan of diary studies.
All right. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. And then we're going to post the slides on the event page so you can have access to the presentation. And I will also share the recording there as well.
Thank you
Hey,
so
Kevin,
much.
add your metrics listing to your presentation. The list of metrics for prioritization.
Oh, okay. Sure,
Okay.
I can add that in.
Okay.
I think you have one or two that I'm not very familiar with. I
Yeah,
would like to explore.
cool. Happy to add that in.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Kevin.
you.
Thank you.
For this great
Thank
presentation.
you. Thanks,
And
Kevin.
thank you everyone for joining.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good evening.